Hello everyone, and I'm recording this after the live conference, and I'm so sorry I couldn't join you. I did spend a frantic half an hour trying to get in, but technology defeated me, and so we're recording what I would have said separately. But I did know from looking at the attendees and also my fellow speakers, I did know that you'd be in great hands and have a really good conference, and I've had feedback that it was really excellent. So it's a pleasure, as always, to be talking about mental health. Many of you will know me, but I've worked in mental health services now for some 37 years, and it's been both a sort of privilege, a pleasure, a frustration, and a cause. I think that there's been never a better time to be working in mental health, and I'm going to tell you why. Firstly, before COVID hit us, we did have the long-term plan for mental health. We're in the second year of a 5-year plan. That's £2.3 billion worth of real funding, with a plan to use that to improve access, thresholds for care, waiting times, and to see 2 million more people by 2023 a year, every year. And that's for children, pregnant mothers, perinatal services, all the way through to services for older adults, end of life, and everything in between. So we had a really exciting plan. We're making huge progress implementing that. We've got some really pithy and real targets that we're set to deliver, real targets. And then, of course, COVID struck. And I want to take this opportunity to say a massive thank you to colleagues across the NHS, third sector, but also communities, local governments, other agency, primary care, anyone and everyone who stepped forward to either work in mental health services, volunteer for them, because we saw lots of volunteers stepping forward, or even those neighbourhoods who established WhatsApp groups so that streets and neighbourhoods could start looking after vulnerable people in their midst. Quite often I'm hearing streets where people had lived together for 20 years but didn't know each other's names. Many of those places and communities now have much more knowledge of each other and a determination to look after each other, tackle loneliness. Lots of services where people shielding and others received telephone calls just to ask if they were okay and what did they need. And then, of course, my NHS colleagues right across the country who kept services going 24/7. We stood down really very few services. The only one that was really affected was memory assessment services for older people. And that was because in the early weeks of the pandemic, we knew too little about how to keep older people safe as we undertook memory assessment services, memory assessments for and with them, and we didn't know enough as well about how to do that digitally, given that this was about assessing cognitive impairment. So those services were stood down, paused for a few weeks. They're all now ramping right back up again, but all others continued to run. We also pulled forward some of our 5-year forward view plans. So one of our goals was that by 2023, we would use some of that £2.3 billion to have 24/7 crisis lines in place across the country, NHS, all age, for children and young people as well as adults and older adults. And that was by 2023. Throughout April and the beginning of May, my NHS colleagues mobilised to set up across the country those 24/7 services, and we achieved 100% coverage in about the middle of May. Quite extraordinary. And now our job is to make sure that those lines really are serving all people, that they're all free phone, that people know about them, and that they're there supporting health going forward. So there were some things like that that were just extraordinary. There was also a real improvement in how people were thinking about physical health. So we know that all too often people with major mental health problems become physically unwell as well, or people with physical health problems become mentally unwell. And we've just not been as good as we ought around physical and mental health and the whole person care. And it was really gratifying to see the extent to which my mental health colleagues across the country really brushed up and honed their physical health skills so that they could take care of people whilst primary care or the acutes were doing what they needed to do. So, amazing there as well. And all kinds of other things that I won't thank people for more now. We made some real advances. I guess a big step forward was also the use of digital technologies. We saw what we believe to be something like a 35-fold increase in the use of digital contact with people. So when we weren't sure we could provide face-to-face care for many, we really worked hard to promote platforms like Attend Anywhere for both groups and individuals, children, older people and older adults. I do just want to say that I don't believe that older adults can't benefit from the use of technology. I think there's a bit of discriminatory thinking that says older people can't. I know a lot of older people who've learned how to use Skype and other FaceTime. If their grandkids have moved to Australia, for example, they'll learn how to use it. So I think we have to be very careful about excluding groups. And I think we have a lot to learn about evaluating this last few months. Digital is not a magic bullet. It can't replace face-to-face, but actually we need to understand that for some people they've preferred it, for others they've not, and on all opinion in between. For some clinical interventions it will be fine, for others not. I think the other thing that we need to talk a lot, think about and understand really well is kind of digital poverty. So not everyone will have a private room where they can go to talk about very personal things associated with their mental health or their therapy session. Not everyone has got the kit and the infrastructure to be able to work digitally around their mental health. So I think that we made a huge stride forward in many ways, whether that was physical, 24/7 healthcare, digital support. We really learned a great deal. However, we now need to evaluate that, look at where pent-up demand has gone, because we saw a big tail off in people coming forward, the new referrals. So we were super good at keeping continuity and contact with known service users, but I think we did see a reduction in referrals to IAPS, talking therapy services, our major mental health services, children and young people. We saw a big tail off there. So a big task for us all at the moment, here and now, is to be looking at the pent-up demand, what's happened to people who didn't come forward. We're now starting to see people coming forward. Our crisis and emergency care pathways are really heating up, and we're seeing more people presenting. We have obviously had to work with the fact that many schools have been closed throughout this period, and a major referral route for children and young people into our services is through education. So we're working really closely, and hopefully in places across the country, the importance of partnership working has been really underscored. So for children and young people, that's definitely local authority, education, families and health, all working together to make, and youth services, to make sure that youngsters don't slip through the net, and that they're school ready for September. And we need to be doing the work now to make sure that particularly more vulnerable youngsters are ready to get back to school in September. And we can't just assume that will be straightforward. So that's a big priority. But also we need to make sure that in the pent-up demand that we think will now come forward, that we're not missing groups or underserved groups. I am concerned, I mentioned older people or memory assessment services earlier. I'm really concerned that we should keep strong line of sight to older people in our long-term plan. I call them the silver thread in the plan: access to talking therapies, depression, anxiety and so on and so forth. Highly treatable by talking therapies, and we know older people are traditionally underrepresented. We know people from different Black and minority ethnic communities often underrepresented in how they come forward. So I think we all know that COVID shone a light on inequalities in society, and I think that's true for mental health too. So as we look at who's not coming forward, how people start to come forward, we really need to make sure that we're targeting those groups most at risk, and we have a real eye to inequalities, and that we're doing that in partnership. We're revamping, or what's the word, rebooting the long-term plan. We never stood it down, but now is absolutely the time to reset trajectories to achieve our progress towards 2 million more people a year by 2023. Both the money flowing to providers, the access being made easier across all of the groups that feature in the long-term plans. So this is a huge priority as well. Mental health services are also looking at, with government and cross-governmentally with partners, about what else is it we need other departments to do. So number one for the NHS is get crack on and implement the long-term plan priorities. But number two is to work with other agencies cross-governmentally on mental health. So we know the economy will have a huge impact on people's mental health as we go into the autumn. Furlough schemes come to an end, we prepare for winter, we look at will there be a second wave or a peak again. We have to be understanding what's happening with worklessness and employment, massively important to people's mental health. I've already talked about schools going back in September, hugely important we're working together around the mental health of our youth. We need to be working with local government and communities, because what we don't want to do is pathologise or medicalise all mental health needs. And COVID has shown us that there's such a lot that our third sector partners can do, that local communities can do themselves. We're working really closely with Public Health England on Every Mind Matters, and making sure we get more supports out there for people online or through primary care, where people may be able to help themselves and each other as well. So really important that we look to both local government but also national government to ensure that we all work in partnership and don't medicalise every need, don't wait till the point of crisis, and do intervene earlier and differently. Workforce will remain one of our big challenges, but I've got lots of reasons to be hopeful. I think the long-term plan itself was shining a light on what great careers you can get if you come and work in mental health. What's not to love? You can be working with mothers and babies, you can be a counsellor in primary care, you can work in an acute inpatient setting, you can work with people with post-traumatic stress disorder, you can be a counsellor and now increasingly undertake that work through IAP from home, and so many other roles. It's not true. So we have seen an increase in people coming to work in mental health in recent years. Great. I think COVID has made people even more interested. We've seen volunteers coming into the mental health space. We've seen people returning from retirement, but we're also seeing a lot of interest from youth or people with new careers. And of course, with unemployment rising already, there are going to be people out there with huge talent and skills, maybe mid-career, who now will be needing to or wanting to make a career change. I say to them, come and work in mental health. You can just have the most satisfying and rewarding careers ever, and you can make a difference. So I think it's really important that the NHS, but also our third sector partners and others, are rooted in a place, become the anchor institutions we say we'd like to be across the country, and that we contribute to economic prosperity, and that we're job creators, which in turn is a kind of bit of wealth creation, at least at an individual and family level. So we're driving employment really hard. And I'd really like to see over the next year or two 10 and 20,000 more people coming into mental health careers. Right values, obviously prepared to work hard, the right people, not just anyone. But I think there's massive talent out there and a lot we can do. So I guess, in a way, to conclude, there's so much I could say, but in a way to conclude, we had a long-term plan before COVID, 2.3 billion for 2 million more people. We know that there's a big treatment gap in mental health. We have to close it. Big government backing, still a big agenda around challenging stigma and people coming forward. But we have an exciting plan before COVID. COVID has taught us some things and has made us advance element of that plan, which is great. We need to consolidate that. But we now also need to ensure that areas that we didn't tend to during the pandemic are fast-tracked, and that really we're on track by 2023 to see those 2 million more people a year. Much to understand about how we employ digital to reach more people and provide more satisfaction for some, not for everybody. Much to drive into the partnership and equality space, and really important that we work with local and national government and the various departments to make sure we don't just medicalise mental ill health, and that we work in an empowering way, I suppose, supporting local communities, different groups, third sector, to really lead a lot of this agenda. But of course the NHS is a really, really important partner in all of that, as well as our local government. So I think that's all I really want to say at this stage. There's so much more I could say, but we've got a plan. Thank you. Do more, go further, go faster. Mental health has never been more important than it is today. And we've got some great partners to be driving the improvements through and with. So thank you.